Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Coop Radio. I'm back here once again, coming off the heels of all of the stuff that happened this past weekend in Charlotte. Seemingly, a lot of rain is mostly what we can take away from the weekend. It really sucked. The weather the entire weekend ruined a lot of what we could have saw was good racing and solid finishes of, full lengths of any of the races. But we didn't get to see any single one of the Truck, O'Reilly, or Cup Series get to their full length. And that was honestly really disappointing. Um, the Truck race was cut even before the halfway point. The O'Reilly Series race was cut short as well. A lot of guys were pretty disappointed about how that got cut short and the way that that was handled. And obviously the Cup race the same, where it was kind of a mess there at the end. And then ultimately the rain called it with, I think, only like 20 some laps to go. But before I talk any more about that, I really want to start the show with this. If anybody didn't get a chance to listen to my last video that I put up, I did a small half-hour bit talking about the passing of Kyle Busch this past Thursday. I want to go ahead and say right off the bat that I listened back to that a little bit, and I don't feel like listening back to that I did enough justifying how big of a deal this really is. And maybe this is just me and my self-deprecation that I have as far as not doing a good enough job either with this podcast or with anything else in my life. I don't know if it's that or if it really was that I felt like I was true in the sense that I came up short as far as selling how big of a deal this is and doing a good enough job in the tribute that I tried to do or speaking about Kyle that I did. I want to go ahead and say right off the bat, though, to everybody that did tune in to watch that, I very much appreciate you. It's one of the most viewed videos I've done so far, and I think rightly so. When, if anybody didn't get a chance to listen to that, I'll say this. When it happened, the news came out on Thursday. When that happened, it was true shock, I think, as to everybody that saw the news. And I wasn't really overwhelmed with any sort of emotion about it. I think at the time, the reason why was because of the simple fact that, I didn't have a real personal fandom or personal connection to Kyle as a lot of other people seemingly did. I was much more of a Jeff Gordon fan growing up as a kid. And, as I said in that previous video that I talked about Kyle, it was more so he was the antithesis of everything that I was a fan of growing up as a kid. And so it was never really a personal connection to him. And only my personal connection to him started over these last few years, funny enough, since he left JGR. I don't know if that's a coincidence or, there's an actual reason for that, but I think it's becoming more obvious that a lot of the people that go to JGR have this weird, personality shift. And I think the best example that I can come up with as to my example of why I have this thinking is Martin Truex Jr., I think, is this perfect example of somebody who, the years that he spent in DEI and ended up going to Michael Waltrip Racing and then was with Furniture Row for a little bit. He was somewhat of a more reserved, humble, quiet, yet easy guy to cheer for. He never said or did anything that made you kind of either cringe or, kind of come off whiny or anything like that. Funny enough, like a lot of the guys that come out of the JGR camp as far as drivers. How many years was the big thing with Kyle? Well, he was a whiny, over the top, you know, egocentric, anything from top to bottom, like any sort of description that you want to come up with as far as him not being the easiest person to cheer for. And he was not alone in that. There was a lot of people that ran through that JGR camp that were all similar ilk in the sense that it's very hard to cheer for them. You almost have to kind of have this weird, different kind of personality to somehow like that. It's the reason why today I don't know how there are these Denny Hamlin fans out there that love and cheer for him. But then when Truex went to JGR, you saw that personality change where almost it became this weird, like, all of a sudden he's kind of like a lot of the guys that he's teammates with now. The way that he talks and the way that he presents himself and the way that he acts on track and in interviews is very weirdly similar to all of his teammates now. And then, you saw, I think, a personality change within Kyle Busch from when he left JGR to RCR. In these last few years that he's been in RCR, since 23, you can see the difference. You can see the way that he acts on track, or the things that he says in the radio, or the things that he says in interviews, or the way that he is even when things don't go his way, which seemingly a lot of that happened these last couple of years. He wasn't the same freak out, yell on the radio, scream at his crew chief, screaming at everybody, screaming at anybody that talks to him, extremely tough interview, super snippy, all this other stuff. Like, I think Kim Kuhn on the Prime broadcast, when she spoke about Kyle, had talked about that a little bit. About how he made her a better interviewer because you had to be kind of on the ball. You couldn't just have a lob ball question or he would kind of call you out for it. You had to come up with a very smart question that would actually seem like somewhat of a challenge, or ask a question in a maneuverable way to where it wouldn't offend him. And so I feel like that changed when he went to RCR. Now, whether that's, again, like I said, whether that's coincidence or not is up to you. But in speaking about since he left and everything in between that has happened since he left to now, he became much more of a likable person to me. And I started to appreciate him more. And then when you wipe away the fanatic part of you of being a fan, where you just look at something, with blinders on, and you block out anything and everything that he did accomplishment-wise, and when you do that as a fan, it's hard to see how good the guy was or how good anybody is or appreciate the greatness. But these last few years, I was able to appreciate him a lot more. Appreciate the 63 now victories that he's had. 9th all time as of right now. Appreciate the 2 championships that he has. Appreciate the 234, now that I have that number in my head, by the way. The 234 victories across all 3 series. And although I'm late to that, now that I am in that frame of mind where I can sit there and even before his death go, God, that guy was good. And he really was. And this is why, if you go back and listen to the Kyle Busch versus Denny Hamlin episode that I did X amount of weeks ago, this is why I was such a defendant of Kyle, is because for all those years that I sat there and in my head as a fan bashed on him and hated on him and all that other stuff, over these last few years I was able to open my eyes and appreciate how good he really was and understand that I don't think it's a coincidence that the year that he left JGR, he had one good year at RCR and then it tanked. And I don't think that that's him. I don't think that that was him. I think that that's just the team. And if you go back and listen to that episode, I brought up the argument of, is Ross Chastain now washed? And is, all these other guys that go to different teams and, kind of fall off the map a little bit, is that on them or is it really the driver? That's where I brought up the argument of like, well, look at Jamie Johnson. He's the opposite example of that. Somebody who didn't leave, stayed at Hendrick, and that really was him falling off because he had mostly the same everything. He had the same team, he had the same crew chief, he had the same owner, he had the same sponsors, he had the same everything. And yet he fell off and tanked. And it was only after he fell off was when they tried to make changes and they moved Chad out and they put Kevin Mendeering in, who eventually became Cliff Daniels. And then yet still nothing improved and nothing changed. And then only then did he finally step away and retire. But it wasn't the team's fault, it was Jimmy. And in Kyle's case, it's not Kyle's fault, it's the team. And so, with that said, I don't think that that's why, or I think that that's why it didn't hit me so hard on Thursday. Why I saw some people saying, they shed a tear for him and, people were obviously crying over him and rightly so. I mean, this is really this generation's Dale Earnhardt. And it may have not been as dramatic as, dying at the track in the biggest race that we have to offer on live television in front of millions of people. And watching the paramedics work on him and watching the timeline of everybody realizing that he passed and seeing it all happen in front of your face, it wasn't as dramatic. But I think to this generation, it is almost as impactful. And the only reason I say it's not as impactful is only just because of the simple fact that he didn't have as many accomplishments as Dale Earnhardt did. Dale Earnhardt won 7 championships. He won 80-some races. And he, in so many ways, was the face of the sport. And I had a conversation with a friend of mine just the other night about this, and this got me thinking as well about, like, who really is the face of the sport today. And he made the argument that he thought it was Kyle. Now, I would only disagree because of the simple fact that when Dale Earnhardt was the face of the sport, like he was everything within the sport. In the sense of he was the best driver and he was the most popular. I mean, they had Dale Earnhardt himself was half, if not probably more, of the merchandise sales, and he was most of the reason why people watched, and this is why it was such a heavy weight to put on Junior's shoulders when his dad passed of, all right, well, your dad just passed away, and then an entire sport worth millions and millions of dollars just turned to him and went, all right, kid, you're up. And the only reason why I say that Kyle's not the face is because Kyle didn't have that same type of popularity, on top of the fact that there are other people within the sport that I feel as though are still more popular today. I think Chase Elliott is the obvious example of somebody who he is the most popular driver and will be for the next X amount of years until he eventually retires. I feel like as of late, Carson Hocevar has stepped up to the plate a bit as far as getting his recent win at Talladega and fans starting to flock towards him because of the quote similarities that he has to Dale Earnhardt and the small, subtle ways that people are trying to really read into. And maybe a Kyle Larson. Funny enough, like there's people that aren't NASCAR fans or really NASCAR fans that I've had conversations with that are only a passing interest. And it's been like, who's your favorite racer? Like who's the guy that if you were to watch a NASCAR race that you cheer for? Weirdly enough, it's Kyle. And Larson, maybe because of the simple fact of how good he is, maybe it's more of a bandwagon thing because he's branded in and pushed as the best that the sport has to offer right now, and he's the best driver in the world or whatever people are saying. Maybe there's a reason why that is, but I'd still say that those few people I would put ahead as far as popularity on Kyle. Now, no shot to Kyle Busch, that is. But again, a lot of his career has been about he's not very likable. He's kind of the most hated. Only these last few years was he really cheered and revered. So that's why I'd say it is this generation's Dale Earnhardt, especially also because of the fact that 2010, he owned the 2010s. If you want to look at the who owned, like who was the guy for each decade, if you want to look at the 2000s, I think Jimmy was obviously the guy who owned the 2000s. I mean, you can't win half the championships that happened in a decade and not own that decade. But if you look at the 2010s, I mean, Kyle owned the 2010s. He was by far the most talented person from 2010 to 2019, winning multiple championships in that decade, having some dominant seasons in the process. And that is why I think that this generation of young fans and, maybe not totally young, but younger fans, this hits them so hard. I myself am one of those people that, hey, I, just as much as Jeff Gordon and Tony Stewart and Dale Earnhardt Jr. and Denny Hamlin and Matt Kenseth and Carl Edwards and Kurt Busch and, all these different guys who were around for so many years of me watching the sport growing up as a kid, Kyle was just as much as one of those guys. And if you were going to ask me right off the top of my head, as far as all those guys that I just named, who's the best out of all those, I'd only say Jimmy's first because he has the 7 championships, and Gordon is second because he has the 93 wins and 4 championships. But Kyle Busch is right there in third. And who knows, in a different playoff system, if that wasn't around, how many more championships he would have had. I mean, and also at the same time, I don't want to discount the 234 victories across all 3 series. And I know that some people might be like, well, he has 100 some wins in the O'Reilly series and 69 in the Truck series. And he's just beating up on younger guys who are less experienced and probably a bunch of people that have lesser equipment. And look, at the end of the day, he was in better equipment in the Cup series. He was in Joe Gibbs Racing equipment, which is top 3 echelon equipment every year. Mostly top 2 every year. And yet he still got 63 wins there. And I understand that the argument can be made about him beating up on younger guys, 18, 17-year-old kids that are mostly showing up to these truck races. But at the same time, he's still got to show up. He's still got to race. He's still got to put in the work. Trevor Bayne told a story about how he was in the O'Reilly series, had put the car on the pole, and he talked about how, well, Kyle just flew in from some other state where the Cup series was at, dropped out of a helicopter, hopped into the car, and put the fucking car on the top of the board without any practice. That, to me, shows the talent. There's how many other people who, as I've said previously, there's how many other people who race Cup or race O'Reilly, and they take a step back to a lower series and they can't go out there and just destroy the whole field. They can't go out there and just run people out of the way and dominate the entire race. So this is a very, very big deal. And so, like I said, when it dropped Thursday, it didn't hit me emotionally. Friday, same thing. And I think it was because, Friday, yeah, a lot of the racing was rained out, and so there wasn't really anything to kind of be like, oh, he's not on the track. Plus, look, Truck Series is not really what, I mean, I know he races trucks a good amount, but again, he's not a truck racer. A Rally Series on Saturday, same thing. Yeah, I mean, racing was kind of, again, spotty and shoddy, and, they didn't get to finish the race, and, so that kind of sucked. But again, it was, yeah, it's still sad. But I think at the same time, for me, it was almost this weird fog of, I don't fully believe it still. I don't fully, like, it hasn't hit me in the sense that I don't fully believe that he's gone. And I don't know if it's a coping mechanism that I had or a shield I was putting up mentally without knowing it that was making me not fully comprehend and fully try to digest the fact that he's gone. Maybe it was that. Maybe it wasn't. I don't know. Maybe it was just the simple fact that there's a 41-year-old that I'd seen on my television screen every week for my entire life. And whether it was Kurt or Kyle that was out there, there's, always been a Busch in the field. And it was hard to comprehend that he's not here anymore. But I think it didn't hit me until Sunday. And I'm not ashamed to admit, Sunday I got pretty emotional. I was getting somewhat emotional before the race invocation and the little thing that they did before the engines fired. I was getting emotional before that. It was starting to get me teary-eyed when Bubba was speaking. And to see how broken up he was, even how many days after, and to hear him speak on the Prime pre-show and how broken up he was, that got to me a little bit. But it did not get to me fully until I saw Samantha and I saw Brexton and I saw Lennox. And that's where I lost it. And even thinking about that now, it gets to me because it's not even, like I said in the previous video that I did, it's not even about like, oh, this is somebody that I have a connection with and it's a driver I see every week and, oh, it's just sad. It's down to the base level of somebody that was a father that was only 41 years old that did nothing wrong. He didn't make a mistake. He didn't go out and drink and drive. He wasn't doing drugs. He wasn't partying like crazy. He wasn't driving erratically for no reason. He wasn't doing anything dangerous that could have harmed himself in any way, shape, or form. He was just living life. He was just operating any other normal everyday life that you or I would do. Going to work, doing what you needed to do, going home, being with your family, not doing anything crazy, not doing anything stupid, just living life. At an age where, yeah, you're middle-aged now, but hey, I'm in the prime of my life in the sense that right now it's about enjoying my family and it's about enjoying my wife and enjoying my kids and enjoying getting ready to retire and getting ready to possibly, I don't know what his aspirations, I know his aspirations with Brexton were obvious, but I don't know, possibly try to give back to the sport as a whole. Maybe he wanted to get back into being a team owner again. Maybe he wanted to try to be some sort of commentator within the sport. Maybe he wanted to have some sort of a say in the direction of the sport as a whole. Hey, I have this wealth of knowledge that I've seen what hasn't worked. And I want to try to help push this sport forward in the sense of not just for my son, but for everybody's kids in the future of the sport. I don't want to see this thing fold in the next couple decades. I want this thing to last for another 100 years. And I want to help make that happen. And I think that when I saw his wife and his kids, it all hit me right then and there that any one of those possibilities, any one of those things that he wanted to do could never happen again. Any chance that he would have had to enjoy retirement was gone. Any chance that he would have had to watch his son grow up, not just grow up in racing, but just grow up, period, was gone. Same thing with his daughter, gone. And to see his parents and his older brother Kurt, knowing that not only should no kid at 11 or 4 years old lose his dad that young, or lose any parent that young, but to also know and understand that no one should ever have to bury their son. No parent should ever have to see the day that their son is no longer with them. Every parent, I mean, in a perfect world, obviously, every parent should outlive their children, or should not outlive their children. And it is, to me, I don't know what could be more depressing as a parent themselves. Getting to older age, getting to your 60s and 70s and having to bury your son or bury your daughter. It would be the worst. And I don't know if I said this on the previous video, but I mean, even thinking about Kurt, I mean, if you want to talk about between the two brothers, who do you think would probably, pass away sooner? I don't even think just because of the age and the fact that Kurt is, older than Kyle, but it was more so just Kurt's made so many more mistakes than Kyle has. He's had a much more checkered past than Kyle has in so many different ways. And I can't imagine what's going through Kurt's mind. It's somebody who I think has been kind of forgotten about in this conversation. Everybody's so sad for Samantha and Brexton and Lennox and his parents and all the drivers and the crew at RCR and everybody at JGR and everybody. But Kurt's kind of, I don't want to say thrown to the side or thrown under the rug or anything like that. I don't think it's that far, but it's more so just I'm shocked that more people aren't talking about, like, oh my God, I cannot imagine what Kurt is thinking. Because I have a younger brother. I'm the oldest of 3 siblings. My brother is only 3 years younger than I am. And it scares me, depresses me, to have to think about that possibly happening in the future as well to myself. I don't want to outlive my younger brother or my younger sister. The path that should occur is they should outlive me. That's just how I think in my head. The older person should go first. Or the person that has made more mistakes, or the person who has had a more checkered past and done things to not only themselves but to others, they should be the one to go before the good guy. The one who's made better choices, the one who's done better. And I also want to say, seeing the little speech from Steve O'Donnell and seeing Samantha and Brexton and Lennox, like I said, the fact that they were even affected any of the family, not just Samantha and Kyle's family, but anybody, Kurt, his parents, anybody from the Bush family, the fact that they were there in person days after this happened, to me, I don't know if I would be there. I probably wouldn't. I think in my head, the last place that I would want to be is at a racetrack, seeing the cars that Kyle ran, or a family member of mine ran, seeing the car that he was in, seeing all these people and having to have everybody come up to me and tell me all my condolences with you. I'm so sorry, and having to be in the spotlight. That'd be the last thing that I'd want. My immediate reaction would be to run and hide, would be to stay in the house. And the only time I would come out is when I would have to go to this person's funeral. But besides that, I wouldn't want to be around anybody. I definitely would not want to be on television, being filmed, for anybody to have to watch me, or get to watch me grieve. A grieving process like that of losing a husband or a father or a brother or a son should be done behind closed doors and no cameras around. You should not be suggested or forced or anything like that to grieve publicly. And obviously, I do not think that somebody forced them to do that. I think that that was their own choice. And so for that, the fact that they had the courage, the guts, the strength, if you will, to go out publicly like that in front of millions of people and 100,000 people probably in the stands, and be seen grieving just days after your husband, your father, your son, your brother passes. My respect level for them grew 10 times. And I think, you know what? I'll say this as well. I really want to make a point for this. Out of anybody and everybody there that was in the Bush family, Kurt, his parents, Samantha, Lennox, out of everybody that I saw, there is nobody that I have gained more respect for, that I have gained, that I just look higher on. There is nobody that I like. I sit there and I go, wow, I could not. I know that if I was 11 years old and I sat there and my father passed away, I would not be able to handle going out there just days after and hold strong, hold that firm stance in the way that Brexton did. Like I said, in front of millions of people watching, 100,000 people in the stands, all these people behind me that respect the hell out of my dad and looked up to my dad, and I would not be able to stand there and to be as strong as Brexton was for his sister, his mom, his uncle, his grandparents. I don't know if I'd be able to do that. At 11 years old, I now believe that at my age now, at 26, I can handle that. As an adult, I can handle that. But as an 11-year-old child, I don't think I could. And the fact that he was able to be a rock for his mom, who obviously was barely being held together. I mean, she is weeping. This whole time that she's out there, she is weeping. And Brexton stood there and was just an absolute rock for her. That to me, and it's not even like, oh, he's too young to understand. No, no, no. You're old enough at 11 years old to understand the magnitude of what has occurred. You can maybe say that about Lennox, who's 4 years old, and, you know, maybe at that age you can go, Dad's just gone for a very long time, and he won't be coming back. And yeah, you might cry, but and be sad about that, but you don't really understand the magnitude at 4 years old of what has happened to you. Brexton, I fully believe, does. I fully believe that an 11-year-old kid understands the magnitude of losing your father and can comprehend the fact of how much has just been thrown at him and all of the hardships that now face him in the future. That, by the way, he can't navigate without his father anymore. So I think that, to me, there's nobody over this past weekend that I've gained more respect for than Brexton. And I know there is this tweet that I saw within my friend group. It has been passed around a bunch, that somebody said, you know, Brexton's popularity is going to make Dale Jr.'s look like Cody Ware or something like that. I don't think that it will be that to that magnitude, because again, the comparisons are, look, Earnhardt was the most popular guy, the most influential, important person within the sport by a country mile in every way, shape, or form, because he wasn't just the best. He was influential within the sport itself, in the sense of, I mean, hell, he was making decisions behind closed doors. He was influencing the people that ran the sport because everybody respected him that much. And not only that, but he was the most popular person by a country mile over everybody within the sport. I mean, he was NASCAR. And then anything and everything that was responsibility-wise was thrown onto Dale Jr., and he was asked to carry that. And on top of, also, let's be honest, the sport was more popular 20 years ago than it is today. So there's more pressure and therefore more fandom that came with what happened to Junior. So no, I don't think that Brexton's fandom will blow Dale Jr.'s out of the water. But I can damn sure tell you it'll be close. And I damn sure know that without a shadow of a doubt that when the day comes, it's not an if. When the day comes that Brexton will get an opportunity to drive, not just in the Truck Series, not just the O'Reilly Series, but the Cup Series. When that day eventually comes, there will not be one single solitary person that isn't purposefully being an asshole that will not like him and will boo him. I can tell you right now, if Kyle was still alive, and maybe this is, you know, morbid or unfair or whatever, but I'm just being honest here. If Kyle was still alive and Brexton got to the Truck Series, the O'Reilly Series, the Cup Series, and made that move, got to the Cup Series, got an opportunity, and Kyle was still alive, I guarantee you that the split would be more 50-50 because there's still going to be those people that go, yeah, it's a spoon fed, silver spoon, getting the opportunity because of who his dad is, blah, 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 all that other stuff. The stuff that Austin Dillon ate for years and the stuff that Ty Gibbs is currently eating. He'd be getting that if his dad was still alive. But I can tell you right now, any chance of that happening is gone. Any chance of anybody sitting there would legitimately be going, why is he in the Cup car? He doesn't deserve to be in the Cup car. Yet any chance of that happening is gone now. Because I don't think anybody in the right mind would go, hey, you're privileged, Mr. Brexton Busch, because you get an opportunity in the Cup Series. Oh, by the way, to anybody who says that, this guy has been now put in the limelight again, same as Dale, maybe not to the magnitude, but put in the limelight, somewhat the same as Dale. Fair or not. And, oh, by the way, even at a much younger age, at 11 years old, all this time that you now have to try to figure out how to become a man and become an adult that most everybody else gets to do with a father to help him. Yeah, now you don't get that. Your dad's not here anymore. And he's not coming back. And there's all this shit for the rest of your life until you become an adult, for the next 7 years of your life that you now have to try to navigate and figure out without your dad. And I'm not even thinking about, all this wealth of knowledge that he could have passed down, driving wise, and could have taught him this and could have taught him that when it came to racing. Fuck that. There's enough knowledge from everybody else that is going to help him, that is going to make him okay. I am only talking strictly from a father perspective. Because yes, will there be people within his life that will be somewhat of father figures? Yes, I guarantee you that Kurt will be as much of a father figure as he can be to Brexton. I know it. And I guarantee you that there will be other drivers and other people, not just drivers, but other people that are either friends of Kyle or family members of Kyle that will try their best to be as much of a father figure and help out as much as they can for Brexton. But there is no replacing that. Because at the end of the day, all these other people, they aren't my dad. They aren't his dad. No matter how hard they try and no matter how great a people they are, they're not Brexton's father. And for anybody who has a father, which is everybody, you all know and understand the difference. You all know and understand how important that is. I mean, there are people that lose a single family member, a father or a mother, and their life can spiral because they may lean on them so much. And I guarantee you that not just Brexton, but everybody in that family leaned on Kyle. So yeah, there's no replacing him. Not just in NASCAR, not just within his family, just period. There's no replacing Kyle. And I myself, I don't know what I'm going to think in 10 years when Brexton eventually tries to get into the Cup Series. Even now, I don't really have a favorite driver. My favorite driver was Jeff Gordon, and he retired in 2015, and even ever since then, I've never really had a favorite driver. I have people that I like. I like Ross Chastain. I like Carson Hocevar. I like Chase Elliott. I like some people. But there's no, that's my guy. Gordon was that guy for me. I mean, again, since we're sitting here admitting to when I cried my eyes out when Jeff won at Martinsville that last year in 2015. When he won that last race in Martinsville to get himself into the championship four, I cried my eyes out for him. Because I fully thought he'd never win another race for the rest of his career. I thought I'd never get to see another chance of him being the best, going out there and winning. And then on one of the last races of the year, right before he was done, I got to see that. And that got to me. So, but when it comes to Brexton, I don't know if I don't think I'll feel that same way about him. But I can guarantee you, just as much as probably everybody else within the sport, I am cheering for him to be successful. I'm cheering for him to do well. I'm cheering for him to do as much as he can. I'm not expecting 63 wins and multiple championships. It's the same thing as Dale Jr. I'm not expecting you to be your father. I just want you to do as well as you can. I want to see him win races. I want to see him be successful. Because it's not going to replace his dad. It's not going to replace the hurt that he's felt. But it'll help lighten the load. I can't imagine the pressure that kid is. And the funny thing is, like, no one is putting pressure on him. Or they shouldn't be. But I guarantee you he is putting so much pressure on himself to not just try to live up to what his father did, but to try to be the man of the family now. Which is so unfair to do to an 11-year-old kid. But I know nobody's doing that to him, but he's doing that to himself. And I think that's why he stood there stoically, straight-faced, without a tear in his eyes, being a rock for his mom in the way that he did, because I know in the back of his head, he is thinking, I have to try to fill my dad's shoes now. And I know he's going to do that when he gets to the Cup Series. He's going to say, I have to fill my dad's shoes to the fullest extent. I have to live up to the Busch name. I have to live up to the 234 wins that he has. I have to live up to the multiple championships. I have to live up to that Hall of Fame, one of the greatest to ever do it, expectations. But just like Dale Jr., that's not expected of him. I'm not expecting that of him. And nobody should. I just hope that he does well. I hope that he does. Because again, no matter how many times he wins, no matter how many championships he may win, no matter how much success he may find, it's not going to replace the hurt that has already occurred. But it will at least dull that pain. And yeah, I know that there are plenty of people around him that are going to try to give him advice, are going to try to help him navigate his future, try to help him deal with anything and everything that he's going to have to deal with now for the rest of his life and the rest of his racing career. And I know that Ty Gibbs said, something about being one of the, few people that know and understand what Brexton is going through. And I know some people might take that as like, oh, okay, whatever, Ty, whatever. But I mean, he is being honest. I mean, you might not like Ty. And look, I'm not his biggest fan either. But he is right. Ty lost his father at a younger age, maybe not 11, and Ty is in the spotlight. Gibbs is a big time name, and he's in one of the biggest teams in the NASCAR sport right now. He isn't in a high pressure situation. I mean, he's got a lot of pressure on himself as well, having the last name Gibbs of like, you have not lived up to the expectations that have been put on you. And up until this year, you haven't looked like you've lived up to anything. And so, yes, with that last name comes privilege, but yet higher expectations. And I know that, so like I said, I know that Ty put something out there and said something like, hey, I understand what he's going through, but let's be honest. I think maybe again unfairly to this person, but I think, in my opinion, if there is anybody that I would myself say, hey, who do you think that Brexton should go to for advice? As far as like, he's now an 11-year-old child without a father and all the expectations in the world for him to try his best to get to the Cup Series and be a NASCAR driver and try to be as successful as he can be to live up to his father's name. Who would you push him to go ask advice from? Who would you say, hey, if there's anybody that you need to go talk to and you need to, that would give you the best advice is how you should navigate, the rest of your life and the rest of your racing career and maybe what you should be focusing on right now. If there's anybody, then I would have him go talk to. It's Dale Jr. And again, maybe it's unfair to Dale because should it be his responsibility that he continuously has to bear that responsibility of, yeah, I was the guy that everybody turned to and said, yeah, you got to help push this sport into the next 20 years of, if not more now, because he's still, I mean, you want to talk about who's probably still the face of the sport now. It's still probably Dale. He hasn't been in the car in over 10 years. Almost 10 years. And yet he's still probably the face of the sport now. He's the most popular. And if anybody who does drive every now and then, he's still the most popular person. You throw him in the most popular driver vote right now today, he'd still win that motherfucker. And so is it maybe unfair to say, okay, Dale, because your dad passed away when you were when he was a very, very popular person within the sport and a very important person in the sport, and all this weight was put on your shoulders. So now you have to turn around and help guide this person for the next X amount of years because they dealt with the same trauma. Is it maybe unfair? Absolutely. But if there was anybody that I would want to speak to or get advice from as far as what the fuck do I do kind of thing, Dale's the first person I'm going to. So, and I haven't, obviously Dale's podcast hasn't came out yet from this week. And I know he said a couple of things. But I am going to be very curious. If there's any podcast that I'm going to listen to this week, I know I rag on the Dirty Mo Media guys a lot, but I'd want to hear their perspectives on Kyle's passing. And I think if there's anybody that I do want to hear from the most, it's obviously Dale. The rough relationship that they've had in the past, him and Kyle, the run-ins that they've had. But I think if there's anybody that, again, I'd want to hear from, I want to know what Dale's advice would be to Brexton. And I want to know, I would love to know that Dale would be somebody that would obviously help him. And I know he would be. But it would be nice to hear, I guess. So, with that said, I think that's honestly a better a better piece of what I talked about Kyle than I did the tribute thing. And so yeah, it got to me. The seeing Samantha and Brexton and Lennox and the entire Busch family, that got to me. And I cried. I definitely cried. And it really, I mean, not just the rain and the weather dampened the weekend and just kind of made it feel like a whole malaise. But obviously, I think Kyle and his passing was more so what made the weekend so depressing. And it was almost another dagger every time that they would go to like a commercial break or something like that on Prime when Adam Alexander would be saying, he would go, and this weekend is about, us remembering. And I know that, obviously coming into the weekend, it was more so about, you know, Memorial Day and all of the soldiers who have risked their lives for our freedom. And I know that that was obviously the intention of why he was saying that, but it really, to me, I interpreted it every time he said it was more so just remembering Kyle. And so every time that he said it, it was almost just like another small prick. It was another small dagger. It was another small cut of like, oh, yep, yep, yes, this is about remembering Kyle. And remember Kyle, remember Kyle. That's just all I heard every time that he said that was remember Kyle. I mean, out of all the people, I know that some people might be like, oh, it's not true. But the more I think about it, the more it is this, in our own way, is our Kobe Bryant. Somebody who was one of the best to ever do it. I mean, the similarities that somebody put out, they both died at 41. Yes, Kyle wasn't totally retired. Unlike Kobe was already retired for a little bit. I understand that. But at the same time, they're both 41 years old. I saw somebody like, yeah, they were both wearing the 8 at the end of their careers. Both one of the greatest in their respective sports, and both died in very unexpected and tragic ways. Obviously, one died in a helicopter crash, and the other one just died of pneumonia that turned into sepsis, but still just as unexpectedly and still just as hurtful. And the same thing that happened with Kobe, or the same thing that happened with Kyle, happened with Kobe in the sense that for me, in my head, I remember thinking, like, that's just, I didn't believe it for a good amount of time. And I still, today, when it comes to Kyle, and I don't know if this will ever, maybe it'll hit me in a few years where I'll finally accept it. But for now, it still doesn't feel real. It's still not fake. Fake isn't the right word, but like Dale Earnhardt, I've accepted has passed away. I mean, he would have been 70 something years old today. So it's more believable in my head to go, yes, a 70 some year old man is no longer with us. Or even somebody who's 60 or 50. It's more believable to say, yes, they're no longer with us. But a 41-year-old, it's hard to believe. And plus, like, I mentioned all these other guys earlier that are such influential people throughout my childhood as drivers who have either are still around or still racing in smaller series and more part-time, or they're just fully retired enjoying their retirement. I mean, I can go down the list of all these people. I got all these people in, like I said, Jimmy Johnson, Jeff Gordon, Junior, Denny Hamlin, Kevin Harvick, Tony Stewart, Mark Martin, Matt Kenseth, Truex, Kurt Busch, Carl Edwards. I know that Jeff Burton's getting put into the Hall of Fame this next go around. He's still around. Casey Kane, Ryan Newman. I'm just going down the list of all these drivers of the past. Clint Boyer is still around. Kyle Petty, for as little as amount of wins he has, he's still alive. McMurray's still alive. Like, he's still around. There's all these guys that, whether good or not, were always on the track when I was a kid, and so they're influential names in my mind. They're people that stick in my mind as recognizable faces and names that, to me, when I think NASCAR driver, I think of like these names first. And they're all still alive. And what's funny is, like, all these guys that I named, they're all gone and retired. Either for a good amount of time or just in the last few years, they've all gone. They're all gone. Besides Denny, they're all gone. But Kyle wasn't. And out of all those people that I named, there's only one of them that really is gone. And it's Kyle Busch. And I think that that's another reason why it's so hard for me to believe, is just that simple fact of, like, well, these other guys are still alive. Well, then in my head, then Kyle Busch should still be alive. So it will be a full year of remembering, of memorializing, of reminiscing about the good, bad, and the indifferent when it came to Kyle Busch. And it will still be something that will hit people for a very long time. Because even on a base level of, like, yeah, he never actually was done. He was never actually retired. And he probably still would have raced for another 5-6 years, waiting for his son to get truck racing and run a part-time schedule with his son in the trucks, helping his son. So he still would have gotten plenty more years of Kyle Busch in a NASCAR car. Whatever level that would be, he would still be out there racing. And now we don't. So it'll be tough. It'll definitely be tough. Let's talk about the actual races of the weekend. Like I said earlier, it's not really a whole lot I can talk about with the Truck Series and the O'Reilly Series. I will say this, across the board, from the racing we did get in all three series, really, the racing was good. I will give it credit. The racing across the board, in my opinion, in all three series was good. And I think it really is just a showing of how good Charlotte as a track really is. The Truck Series was fun. The O'Reilly Series was really fun. And the Cup Series was just as fun. Now, the only caveat that I would say about the Cup Series is, and I ran the NIS Coke 600 last night at the time of me recording this, so I can say that this makes sense, and I do believe this. The leader had such an insane, unfair advantage because of the clean air. And that is the only thing that I would say that I did not appreciate about the Cup Series. It was very evident, I think, when it came to when Zane Smith took 2 tires and was able to hold the gap to all the other guys, Denny Hamlin, Reddick, Briscoe, all these other guys behind him that were stuck behind them or stuck behind him. And it's all just because of the dirty air. And it's all just because of the fact that the leader has such an advantage with clean air out in front that with less tires can just keep that lead for the entire time and not have anybody challenge him. No matter how long the run went, nobody actually finally got to him and challenged him. And that to me was like, wow, that's concerning. And so I don't want to say it ruined the race, but in a lot of ways it made me just go, yeah, well, it's pretty obvious the leader has just such an advantage compared to everybody else out there that, sure, the racing second on back is great. The racing second on back is fun and entertaining to watch, but whoever gets that lead, it's like, and the race is over. And whether that would have been the case if we went the full distance or not, I don't know. But that was just the feeling. That it was just like, all right, well, who's ever got the lead is just going to sail off, and they're going to, once a few laps in, it's pretty much set. Maybe in a couple laps, somebody in second can push themselves as hard as they can and hit the right lanes where they're not behind the guy in front of them, so then they can get to the leader and pass him. But besides that, it was all but over. And so, again, it's a continuous problem with this car. It's a continuous problem, it seems, every week with this fucking car. No matter what car, no matter what track they go to, there's some small issue within this car that is a constant thorn in the side of watching the Cup Series. That being said, I will also say, wow. Last year, I knew the broadcast was so much better on Prime, but especially even this year, it was much more evident. The pre- and post-race show that Prime does is second to none in comparison to all other broadcast partners, TNT, Fox, and NBC. The actual product during the race, as far as camera shots, presentation with the overlays, the crew that's in the booth actually commentating the race, everything across the board is miles ahead of everybody else. And I think, honestly, the best example that I can give is I want you to go back, and maybe I don't even need you to go back and watch this, but go back and watch just a 5-minute segment. Any 5, not even 5, just look at the still shots, really. Look at the still shots of the Coke 600 from this year and the Indy 500 from this year. Down to the base level of the picture, the quality of camera angle, or the quality of cameras probably used from the Prime broadcast to the Fox broadcast that did the Indy 500. It makes the Fox broadcast look like it was done in 140p. Like it looks so much blurrier. It looks just so much like worse overall. Not even just the overlay looks way worse than the Prime overlay. And yes, the commentators for the Fox broadcast and the Indy 500 were very, very good. I will give that crew all the credit in the world. They were very good. But just the baseline picture of just the quality of whatever cameras they were using or whatever, it just looks like it was from the early 2000s. It just looks worse. And I don't think it wasn't, the weather was, it wasn't sunny out, it was cloudy out, and so that's why it kind of looked gray and not great. No. It was, Fox is just, it's just bad. It really, really is bad. And it's sad because, like, that Indy 500 race, too, I'll go ahead and say this. The Indy 500 race was a great race as well. It was a really good race. Amazing finish. Closest finish in Indy 500 history. That last lap pass there, the last corner pass, last straightaway pass, really, was amazing. I fully believed that Malukas had it. I thought the two teammates behind him Rosenquist and whoever the other guy was, Armstrong maybe. I thought those two were going to screw themselves because they were being selfish in the sense that I want to try to pass Malukas for the win, and they were both just holding themselves up. That's what I really thought was happening. I was like, oh my God, those two teammates are going to screw themselves out of the Indy 500, and they're just going to stay side by side trying to fight each other. They're not going to get by either one. They're going to hold each other back, and they're just going to let Malukas drive off and win the thing. And then how quickly Rosenquist passed his teammate, finally cleared him, and then right off of turn 4 got such a run and just barely got by a nose, I think, by Malukas. Amazing finish. Amazing, amazing finish. And yet it's somewhat like because, I mean, not the finish was but how bad the picture is and how bad the quality of the broadcast is. It kind of dampens it a bit. I don't know. Everything within the race was great. Commentators, the race itself, the cars, everything. It was just the broadcast itself of like the picture, the presentation on Fox, everything. It just looked worse. And then you compare that to Prime, and Prime is like crystal clear. Everybody on the broadcast is extremely professional and very good. Carl, again, did a great job. Corey LaJoy did a really good job. The entire pre- and post-race show was great. Like I said, the commentators, I mean, I love Adam Alexander. I think he's doing a great job on CW, and he did a great job at the Coke 600 as well. Junior is always a pleasure to listen to, and Steve Letart's very good at being the crew chief commentator as well. And so it's depressing when you compare that again to the NASCAR Fox broadcast that we've been stuck with, where everything across the board is just like worse. I don't want to take, I guess I'll take pot shots, but like the pit reporters, not as good. The booth, not nearly as good. Like commentators, way worse. The picture itself, worse. The overlays on the actual broadcast, worse. The camera angles, the fact that they keep missing everything that happens on the track all the time on Fox, worse. And then you get to Prime, and I think it'll bleed over into TNT as well. But like, so much better. So that's really the main positive that came out of the weekend, is that Prime is back once again. And thank God they are. Thank God they are. Because I mean, that's really the only main positive that we can get out of the weekend. The other two races, like I said, the truck race was rain shortened. I know that a lot of people, drivers is what more I'm talking about, were very upset over the handling of the weekend, in the sense that they cut the truck race before halfway, and they cut the O'Reilly Series race, even though they probably could have waited and either finished the race later in the night or the next day or something like that, or on Monday. To some degree, I understand why they wouldn't want the O'Reilly Series or the Truck Series to do Monday. And I think the only reason why, in my head, that I can justify is that for some reason they don't want the the quote main event, the last thing that happens from the weekend, to be the O'Reilly Series or the Truck Series. They want it to be the Cup Series, which is like, whatever. If you want your actual advertised main event to be the main event, then fine, whatever. But at the same time, the Truck Series being cut before halfway, I'm more understandable in that, because the Truck Series at that point had bleeded over 2 days. It was supposed to run Friday, didn't get to. Was supposed to run Saturday, didn't get to. Tried to run Sunday morning, then it started raining again, and then at that point it's like, guys, what the fuck are we doing here? Or it didn't start raining again, excuse me. It was a time shortened thing because of the Indy 500. to me, when they lost it on Friday and then had no chance of running it on Saturday, in my head, I was just like, look, the truck series is the third series. You try to kind of squeeze that in as much as you can. And I understand that the drivers are frustrated because they didn't get to run the full distance. But we've already lost 2 days of racing. You're now trying to squeeze it in before the Indy 500 and before the Coca-Cola 600. I understand that Monday is technically open and that you'll probably get more people, enough people to show up on a Monday, not just on their television screens or on their television sets, but at the track as well because of Memorial Day. I get that. But at the same time, like we've already lost 2 days. Like it's getting to the point where you just kind of call it. You get as many laps in as you can. And then at that point, you just call it. So I understand the frustration within the truck series, but I'm more understandable in the truck series as far as, you know, we've already lost 2 days. Sorry, you're the third series. Now the O'Reilly series, on the other hand, I know Jesse Love was very, very upset in his interview. I didn't hear anybody else nearly as upset about the race being shortened as Jesse was upset, but that one I would say once the cup race was over, I mean, obviously you can't do it before the cup race is actually over. You got to hold some time frame if they can't get the cup race over on Sunday and it bleeds over into Monday. But the O'Reilly series, I felt like that one could have been waited on. They still ran on the advertised day on Saturday. Granted, it was very delayed and it went how late, but they still were able to get some racing in on Saturday. And maybe, yeah, you could have actually tried it on Monday or something. And maybe I think that the only reason why NASCAR said, look, we might as well just call it here is because you're going to wait another whole day and a half to run to try to finish the race. At that point, it's kind of lost. So in my head as a fan, I wish they would have actually gone more and actually totally finished the O'Reilly series. But I understand again the perspective of it's how far after the actual race. At this point, we're just running a whole new race because it's how many days after. You're technically 2 days after because there's no chance you're going to get it in on Sunday. You're going to try to, again, at that point, what are you trying to do? You're going to try to squeeze in either the rest of the O'Reilly Series race or you're going to try to squeeze in a truck race. Because at that point, the trucks I don't even think they had ran a lap until Sunday. So it's like, okay, are we going to just fully push the truck race to Monday? Or are we going to try to force in the rest of the O'Reilly Series race, or excuse me, try to force in a truck race on Sunday. And then at that point, the O'Reilly Series race is running, in a day and a half later. The whole weekend was fucked. there's no other way to say it. The whole weekend was fucked due to rain. So it's a tough spot. And anybody who's getting screwed out of a possible win or, the race being shortened is going to be upset. I guarantee you there are how many guys in the Cup Series that were upset they didn't get to run the last 20 some laps of the Cup Series race. But it's a tough spot that there's really no right answer because even if you were to say, yeah, we're going to have them run until Monday. Well, who's to say it won't rain on Monday? Oh, and then what? Are we going to push it to Tuesday? And then at that point, it's like, okay, what are we doing here? Try to get it in as much on the weekend as you can because, hey, we still got to go race next weekend. You're trying to handicap these teams how much. Oh, but you're in Charlotte. Yeah, at the same time, we still got to try to give them teams enough time to prepare for the next race. So. With that being said, I think this is going to be a little bit of a shorter episode. Let's run through my new top 10. Top 10 coming out of Charlotte from this past weekend. I did not have a top 10 last weekend at the All-Star race. I kind of skipped over that one, but brand new top 10 coming off of Watkins Glen, we'll say. Number 10, I put Kyle Larson after the Charlotte race here today. Or not today, but yesterday. Very, very much so an up and down season. They very much talked about how it's been over a year since he's won. He's shown a good amount of speed here at Charlotte this past weekend, and he's been very up and down, but a good run, led a good amount of laps, and so for that, he gets to sneak into the top 10. Number 9, I still have Chris Buescher. Was around the top 10 for most of the Charlotte race this past weekend, and didn't really get the greatest of finishes compared to where he was running, as far as from where I remember. I'm going to take a second look here again. Oh, yeah, he was involved in that wreck. So, did not have the greatest finish because of that, but at the same time, still had a lot of good races before that, so I'm not going to knock him down too much. He's just at 9. Number 8, SVG was 10th after Watkins Glen, and I felt like it was just kind of a pity top 10 because of just how well he ran at the Watkins Glen, but he was running well here at Charlotte, which really surprised me. Now, how much of that is the fact that he got to start third on the field because of the qualifying being rained out? I don't know. But the fact that he was able to hold serve and keep himself near the top 10, mostly in the top 10 for most of the entire time, he finished 11th, is really impressive to me, considering the fact that he has not ran well at ovals for most of this entire season, and most of the time, obviously, that he's been in NASCAR. So a very good run for SVG, and for that, I knock him up a couple spots here. Number 7 is Christopher Bell. Look, slowly falling down the top 10 these last couple weeks, but another good run for him here this week. One of very few that he's had over this season. And at this point, expecting a lot more from Christopher Bell. This is maybe the start of him finding that speed again and turning it around and being that fourth guy at JGR that you expect, hey, all these other JGR guys are doing really well. Maybe it's time you turned it around here. And maybe he's finally finding himself that speed that he's been missing. Number 6, I'm going to keep Chase Elliott at 6. Not very good comparison to his teammate Larson and where you kind of expect him to run. Was involved in that wreck there earlier in the race as well. But even before that, just didn't really have the speed in the car that he really needed. So, but I'm going to keep him at 6. It's one race. Doesn't harm him too much. Number 5, Ryan Blaney. They changed his crew, and yet he's still having issues on pit road. Is it a Penske thing overall, or is it just the worst luck when it comes to pit road shenanigans that Blaney has? This dude has speed. He finished 7th this past weekend at Charlotte. Yes, finished 7th. He has speed everywhere that we go. Granted, this past weekend at Charlotte, for most of the race, he was not really a top-end guy that you really saw in the top 10 or fighting for the lead or anything like that. But what had spots where he was up towards the front, and then, like a prime example, he was running, somewhere near the top 10 or in the top 10, and he dropped down all the way to like 20-something just because his crew screwed up on pit road again. I don't know what else you do at this point. I mean, somebody at Penske's got to figure out why they continuously keep having, and nobody else is having as much issues as he is. Nobody nearly is having this kind of issues. And it's still almost a weekly occurrence. Thought they had it cleaned up, but they still obviously don't. But Ryan's still doing well, so they have him at 5. Number 4, this is not a standings. Chase Briscoe has shown speed so many times throughout this entire season, and I still have him 4th. I know that he was involved in the wreck here this past weekend at Charlotte, but again, another reason why I'm not going to knock him down too much. He was if not leading the top 5, top 3 for most of this race. And this is like another problem, just like Ryan Blaney. Chase Briscoe has the problem of not being able to finish these races, not being able to get to the checkered and actually have these consistent good finishes. I'd hope that after the All-Star race that this would kind of somewhat clean up and, hey, okay, now we're getting to like the halfway point of the regular season. Now is when you kind of clean these issues up, kind of like the same thing with Ryan Blaney. Okay, now is when you kind of have to clean these issues up. And they still haven't. They still haven't. And I don't know, I'll take a look here again. I'm pretty sure Briscoe's outside the top 16 in points right now. Or he's just in. He's 15. He's still just barely in. Ahead of Ryan Preece, who has been very consistent. I'm surprised how low he is. And like Austin Cindric, Joey Logano still hanging around there. Like these are guys that Briscoe has been so much faster than consistently. Cindric, Briscoe, Allmendinger, McDowell, even Ryan Preece has been consistently faster than. And even some of these other people ahead of him, SVG, much consistently faster than him. Bubba Wallace has, as of late, been faster than him. William Byron is a perfect example of somebody who has had some awful races, and yet he's still 12th in points, well ahead of Chase Briscoe. So I know that, like, one of these weekends, all it's going to take is him to just finally put the race to get together completely and get a win, and then it'll be like, all right, now he's fine. But even still, like, it is crazy how many weeks he's had here where he just issue after issue after issue that has ruined his finishes. 3, I have Denny Hamlin. Still one of the fastest guys every week. Was one of the fastest guys here this past weekend as well. Thought he was going to be the guy to actually get the win. It seemed like the fastest guy at Charlotte for most of the race. But he came up short and still one of the fastest guys, like I said, every week. So still number 3. Number 2, right there with him. I'm going to keep Ty Gibbs at 2. He's shown very good speed himself. Was fast again here this past weekend at Charlotte. And I think that he's a prime example of somebody. Where's he sitting? 4th in points. Like, even with just the one win, he has more top 10s, just as many top 5s as Denny Hamlin does. Doesn't have as many laps led, obviously, but, I mean, not even close. I mean, Denny Hamlin has one short of 700 laps led, and the next closest person is Tyler Reddick at 320. Or no, excuse me, I'm sorry, I didn't factor in Kyle Larson there, a couple spots down. He's at 513, but even still, almost 200 more laps than the next person led. Gibbs is only at 95. But the thing is, Gibbs has been just as consistent pretty much this entire season. So I have him at 2. Number 1, obviously, same guy every week. No surprise. It's Tyler Reddick. Was fast again this past weekend. I mean, he was leading the first good amount of the first stage. It seemed like he could have had another shot at winning again this weekend, but one of the fastest guys, once again, running up top 5 for pretty much the entire race, and it's hard to not put him number 1. It really is. I mean, out of anybody and everybody, not just the wins have helped him get that lead, but he has still been one of the most consistent guys because he's found speed at road courses when others haven't. And he's been still pretty good at short tracks, and he's still one of the best at the 1.5 miles every week. So, that being said, before I get out of here, I wanted to mention one last thing that I kind of forgot to talk about earlier after the Kyle Busch speech. The Hall of Fame inductees were announced, I believe, this past week. The 4 that are going in are Kevin Harvick, Jeff Burton, Larry Phillips is the Pioneer ballot Hall of Famer, and then the Lisa France Kennedy, I don't know why I said the. Lisa France Kennedy is also being inducted under the landmark award. She's getting the landmark award for outstanding contributions to NASCAR. Now, I'm not even going to address that. I'm not. To me, it's the meme of Barack Obama putting the medal on himself. It's for any wrestling fan out there, I would even equate it to Stephanie McMahon going into the WWE Hall of Fame. It's to me, if you are a family member of the founders and owners of the sport, unless you are putting in somebody who, like a Bill France Sr. or a Bill France Jr., who previously ran the sport and have passed away, I don't want anybody who is alive, a part of the France Kennedy family, getting an award or being put in the Hall of Fame in any way, shape, or form within the sport while they're alive. I don't like that. It's very it's kind of sad, to be honest, and it's not a great look in my opinion. But putting that aside, the main thing I saw, and I don't want to be the guy to come to the rescue of Jeff Burton here, but I saw a lot of people saying that Jeff Burton is not a Hall of Famer, that he should not be put in the Hall of Fame, that other people should be before him. If you want to make the argument that maybe some other people that aren't in the Hall of Fame yet that should be put in the Hall of Fame, I also, the other thing too, I saw, well, Kyle should be put in the Hall of Fame this year. And I saw some people were saying that there's a chance that that might happen, that NASCAR might make an exception and put Kyle in. But I believe, I don't know the timeline exactly, but I believe that there's a X amount of years that you need to be out of the sport before you can be inducted into the Hall of Fame. So I will say this. If you want to make the argument that maybe there should be some other people that aren't in the Hall of Fame yet that should be put in before Jeff, sure. You can make that argument. The one thing I will say is Jeff is a Hall of Famer. Is he one of the greatest drivers, first ballot Hall of Famer, one of the, is he one of those guys? No. But he has the 40th. He's top 40 in most wins at 21. He, over his 22 years in the Cup Series, has had multiple years of being top 5, top 3 in the point standings. If you go back to 97 to 2000. If you want to talk about the recency bias of the last X amount of years within his career, yeah, when he was with RCR in the 31, was he the most dominant guy? No. But he was still winning races through 06 to 08. He was still running decently well. In 2010, he made the he either made the chase or was just, I don't remember if 2010 was I think 2010 was the one they had 12 instead of 10. Because I think that means he was one of the wild card guys. But 2010, he was 12th in the point standings, where he finished 12th. 2008, he was 6th. And then even like I said, through those last couple of years that he won races from 06 to 08, 7th in the points, 8th in the points, 6th in the points. He was not god-awful for a lot of those years. He's had years where he's had multiple wins, 6 wins in 99. He's not the flashy, it's not Kyle Busch. It's not, thinking of some people ahead of him. It's not Junior Johnson. It's not Tony Stewart. It's not Bill Elliott. It's not Kurt Busch. It's not even Carl Edwards or, it's not these guys that are like, oh, they were really good for a certain time period. It's not that, but it's long-standing, continuous success. I think people forget 21 wins if you compare it to like the 200 or the 100 or the 90s or the 80 some wins that certain drivers have, if you compare it to that, then it looks like a schlub. But you're comparing the very, very high top at the top. Like Mark Martin, Hall of Famer, yes. No championships. That's a mark against him, yes. But he's 20th all time in victories, and he's got 40. That's almost double what Jeff has. And it's only 20 spots. So at the end of the day, 21 doesn't sound like a lot. And no championships hurts. And all this other stuff. But like, he is a Hall of Famer. Let's put it this way. Junior only has 5 more wins than Jeff Burton does at 26. If he's a Hall of Famer, then Jeff Burton's a Hall of Famer. Like, even if you take away the championships, there's how many people behind him? Davey Allison's a Hall of Famer, and he only has 19 wins. Buddy Baker, same thing, only 19 wins. He's a Hall of Famer. Bobby Labonte has just as many wins, and sure, he has a championship, but he's a Hall of Famer. Benny Parsons, the same thing. Harry Gant, who only has 18 wins and no championships, is a Hall of Famer. Curtis Terwin, same thing. 17 wins, and he's a Hall of Famer. No championships. Donnie Allison, 10 wins, Hall of Famer. There's a lot of these guys. Alan Kowicki is a perfect example. Yes, he won 1 championship, but he only had 5 Cup Series victories in his entire career. Hall of Famer. I mean, I'm going down the list here, and I'm seeing a lot of people. And granted, yes, some of these people are Hall of Famers either, due to that legacy award or whatever. And some people, maybe it's because of the simple fact that they have a lot more success in lower series. But no, Jeff Burton's a Hall of Famer. I may not like him. I may not think he's the greatest thing, that's ever happened to the sport. And I may think he's not a great commentator. And I may think that he is, the way that drivers revere him, I don't really understand. And the mayor thing and all that other stuff, I may not be his biggest fan. But at the same time, like, look, you cannot argue against the fact of how many other people that they've already put in the Hall of Fame, that he is a Hall of Famer. So, yes, would I have liked to maybe have seen not Jeff, but Greg Biffle go into the Hall of Fame this year, seeing as we just lost him, and Jeff Burton is still alive, obviously? Yes. I would have rather seen Greg go in this year, especially considering the fact that he had just passed away late last year. I would have much rather that than Jeff Burton. But circumstances, maybe next year will be Greg's year. Next year probably should be Greg's year. But this year it's Jeff. And so, yeah, again, I'm not his biggest fan, but Jeff is a Hall of Famer. I truly believe that. Okay. That being said, we're heading into Nashville next weekend. I gotta say, like I said earlier about the Prime broadcast, the Prime broadcast has me hyped for next weekend. And the next X amount of weeks that Prime has races, I'm going to be hyped for all of them. It'll be an interesting race going into Nashville this weekend. Probably expect most of the same guys to be up front competing for the win. So therefore, I'm going to pass on the 5 to watch this weekend. And let's just enjoy the Nashville race as much as we can. That being said, I'm going to wrap this thing up. Thank you all again so much for listening. I hope you all enjoyed. I'm kind of getting myself I'm kind of getting these things a bit shorter, which is nice. This one's about probably going to be just over an hour 40. Last one I did was an hour 30. I think I'm getting better about not endlessly rambling. And I think I've also said, like, there's been times where I've been doing rants and I feel like I'm just saying the same things over and over and over and over and over again for like a long extended period of time. And I think I'm getting better about that. And I think that that's why these are getting shorter. But even still, like, this was a very light news week. And the only thing that was newsworthy was obviously Kyle. There was nothing, no update on the JGR Chris Gabehart lawsuit, really. There was no talk about that. There was no big quotes about anything or anybody that said that was, super outlandish or, worth talking about. The only main thing was obviously Kyle. So that kind of ruled over anything and everything NASCAR. And when that's the case, that's all there's really to talk about. So I know I did a very long time talking about Kyle and recapping everything that went into the Kyle stuff over the weekend, but it's worth spending a good amount of time on. It's worth spending an hour on because it's deserving of that much time and that much conversation. So, again, I hope you all enjoyed this episode. I'm not going to tell you to please go listen to the Kyle Busch tribute video. Because I feel like I did a better job talking about Kyle in this one. I more just, it was very reactionary and it was more so a synopsis of what I thought in the moment. And I kind of really didn't have my thoughts together too much on him. I feel like I did a better job today in this one than I did the one on Thursday of last week. So I hope y'all did enjoy this one, and I hope y'all will be back next Tuesday, every Tuesday, 6 a.m. Central Time, 7 a.m. Eastern Time, 4 a.m. West Coast Time. We'll be back again next week on Tuesday following the Nashville race. And I will just say this again. Rest in peace to Kyle Busch. We will be thinking about you and thinking about your family for probably the rest of the season and for seasons to go. And it is sad that now the question forevermore for the rest of time will be, what if? What if he never died? What if he was still here? What if he still hung around? What would he have thought about this? What would he have wanted to do with that? That will now forever be the question that we ask about him. And it's unfair and it's sad, but it is a reality of the situation that we are now forced into. So, enjoy the time that y'all have, everybody, because you really never know when it's going to be over. Do what you love. Do what you want to do. Enjoy every day as best you can. Every day is not going to be the greatest. It's going to be shit. You're going to have shit days. You're going to have good days. You're going to have in-between days. But just try your best to enjoy it as much as you can for as long as you can. Because you think that you'll live till 100 or to 90 or 80 or 70. But some people don't get that luxury. Some people get stuck living to middle age, 41. 41 years old. Take it easy, everybody.